In this week in MMA, Matt, we're going to change things up a little bit. We're going to get into round number 1, the Twitter Purge, the weekend recap, the preview of the week that is, and Matt, at the end of the week, the 2-minute breakdown. So look forward to those, and without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, and welcome to another episode of This Week in MMA. As always, one half of your co-hosting duo at Craig Allen FNP. You can find me there on Twitter and Instagram. You can find Matt at Matt Allen FNP. And Matt, listen, a great weekend of fights. Yes. Some would say a little underrated just due to the fact that the cards kind of did fly under the radar. Yeah. And we had so much MMA after UFC 239. Wouldn't you agree?
I would. And when your main event's Darren versus Ladd, I mean, that's not really going to attract the casual viewer. But all in all, it was a decent card.
Yeah, decent card. And we've got a really good card to look forward to this weekend. A lot of fighters maybe fighting out their contract. Yeah. A lot of fighters in some difficult spots, Matt. Like I said from the outset, I really appreciate all the kind words that we had, Twitter, Instagram, and especially on YouTube. So thank you to the new subscribers, everybody who just threw out the positive messages. We're going to do way more 2-minute breakdowns. It was a huge success, and I really do appreciate everybody out there. We're going to run a contest this week on Twitter, so look out for that. I don't just plug those Twitter handles for nothing. No. We're actually quite active on there, so be sure to give us a follow for that reason only. All right, that's my only ask for the entire show. We're also going to be splitting up this show so you can watch the entire thing, just a straight shot. You've got a lot of time. You want to watch podcasts or video show, you can get the whole thing. You can get just our round number 1 answer if that's all you want. You can get our breakdowns. You can get everything as a short shot or as the full thing. So look forward to that. But Matt, yes, as I was saying from the start, we got really good fights this weekend. Leon Edwards taking on Rafael dos Anjos. But let's go back a little bit. Let's have a look at the week that was.
Sounds good.
All right, Matt. So a bit of a weekend recap. UFC, we had it from Sacramento, California. First time being there in the past 3 years. We had a return from a legend, a Hall of Famer in the co-main event. And listen, I'm not tooting my horn.
We got that one a little wrong.
Went 8 for 9 with the picks. Got the co-main event wrong. But listen, some stars in the making. The first one on the list for me, Lavinia Souza, for me, was somebody that, with a win here, was going to springboard to a top 15, maybe a top 10 opponent. She's taking on Brianna Van Buren. You and I talked about this before the fight happened. You can also hear the conversation that I had with guys on Between the Links last night. Be sure to check out that podcast. Mike Heck, Keith Schillen, Davidson Baker, and John Franklin, the Sunday Morning Corner Man himself, was our special guest. But Matt, looking at this fight, I thought Souza could have been a breakout star. She was absolutely dominated by Brianna Van Buren. We discounted her last 3 wins.
We did.
She won the Invicta Phoenix Rising tournament earlier on this year. They were 1-round, 5-minute fights.
Which was very upsetting because they didn't really tell anyone that going into it. And then all of a sudden I was like, man, I'm going to watch like a Pride-style tournament tonight. And then they went. And with our first fight of the night, it is a 1-round contest of 5 minutes. And I turned the TV off because I was very upset.
Yeah, so that happened. And for me, for a lot of people, it was, hey, you know, Brianna Van Buren, what's she going to bring into this? Because, yes, out of those 3 fights, she had 2 finishes over decent opponents, and Kaylin Curran was the final one. She trains at Ruka Sport.
She's 4-7.
I will say that. But otherwise, I mean, Gilroy Wrestling, she has a huge wrestling base. But in this fight, it was her combinations and her pure boxing ability. She looked fantastic. She called out and said, I want a top 10 opponent, and I think she totally deserves that. She beat somebody who was deserving of that. Automatically, she assumes that role. She's the lineal top 10 challenging champ. She deserves that shot.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you really summed it up as perfectly as you could. And that was the thing, too. Coming off that kind of Invicta tournament, you didn't really have much of a baseline for how good she was going to do in the UFC, just due to the fact that the structure was so weird with that tournament. Yeah, you got to see kind of little flashes here and there, but if you only have 5 minutes at a time to show against, and let's be honest, it wasn't really the upper echelon of competition in that tournament, you never really get to see the full package. But no, we definitely saw in a UFC debut that, yeah, she's the real deal.
And if we continue along in the next fight, this was a fight that Matt and I kind of talked about because Jonathan Martinez was supposed to be competing for an LFA flyweight championship before he took on a short notice opponent in Andre Sukumtoth, who, listen, I mean, he had the Sean O'Malley fight, and I know a lot of people in social media, a lot of media members gave him a ton of flack for it. He came out in Moncton, and it was kind of weird. Like, he was almost standoffish with
it was very odd.
The 3 or 4 media members that were there the entire time, and I get it, kind of a persona change, trying to drum up some business. And listen, he looked great in Moncton, but Jonathan Martinez came in on short notice, took that fight. Hey, normally you get a 3-fight contract, and in his last 2 fights, he's looked great, especially in his last fight. Man, on the weekend, it was a knee knockout. He looked amazing, and listen, I'm sure it's going to be deserving of an extension on that contract.
Without a doubt, and we say it quite often, like when a guy does kind of do the UFC a bit of a favor, they always kind of, you scratch our back, we scratch yours, and it's nice to see him take full advantage of the fact that they let him stay around after that first loss.
Yeah, so I mean, a good win there for Martinez. Hopefully we get to see him more in the bantamweight division. I think it's a better spot for him. Moving up to featherweight, Ryan Hall taking on Darren Elkins, a fight that was realistically a flip of a coin.
It was.
Hey.
Ryan Hall, you're doing it.
Ryan Hall with the celly, and he didn't win by submission, was interesting to me, no less.
Yeah, no, it was a weird performance. Ryan Hall's very strange because his arsenal is basically spitting shit and submissions, and there's not much of it in between. But, great fighter to watch. Definitely a rising prospect. He keeps on saying he only wants to fight the best, and you would think with his first kind of top 15 win, this should be his first chance, at least in his next fight, to start fighting, the best of the best.
And if we move on to the main card, of course, Myron Vittori getting the win over Cesar Ferreira, Carl Roberson getting the win over Wellington Turman, and we preview those 2 fights in quite a bit of detail, as much as we could in 2 minutes. So, I mean, listen, Roberson looked pretty good. I know it was a decision win, and it was a close decision win, which kind of surprised me. I know Turman went after it for the first bit and then kind of went in a bit of a holding pattern after that. So we're kind of left wanting more. We have 2 decisions in a row. Then we get Mirsad Bektik and Josh Emmett. And, okay, some people said you guys called this wrong. Now, I'm not, again, I don't want to pump my tires. Yeah, you called it wrong. You called it wrong. And I said,
sorry, Craig,
Josh Emmett
get dropped by a jab in the first round.
With the power that he possesses, but exactly, like you just said, the power that he possesses, and he was a guy that maybe wasn't a huge power puncher early, but when you can knock a guy down, a really good prospect who has really good striking.
I agree. I don't think that the knockdown was attributed to his power in that case. I just think he caught him on an offbeat. I don't think it's the fact that if he jabs you, he's going to put you down. It's just he caught him on the offbeat. And if anything, that's more important. That shows that he has skill and not just knockout power.
It is a combination of both. Don't get me wrong.
No. It has nothing to do with his power in this case. He just caught him with his eyes closed. That was the big thing.
Yeah, I mean, 100% wrong there. I'll let everyone at home try and decide that one. Right? But, Matt, I mean, you have to give him some props for that.
I do.
In our co-main, we have to give props to Uriah Faber.
So wrong. I said Uriah Faber should stay home. I said his chin should have a sensor bar over it. I said a lot of weird things about Uriah Faber. He came back, and it's like, I don't know. You feel good for the guy, because it's never fun when you see guys way past their prime. Like, just last weekend, we saw, Diego Sanchez get beat up, a guy who probably shouldn't be around anymore. We see guys like BJ Penn who, they retire every other fight. But for a guy to finally come out of retirement and show that maybe he did kind of leave too early and he has a lot more to give to the sport, it was kind of neat. Now, with all this crazy talk of, he's going to fight Cejudo next, you get that out of my face right now. I'd love to see him work his way up the ranks. Just get one more win. Match him up against a top 5 guy. Maybe Dominic Cruz has come back, do the 4th fight. I know there might not be much of a market for that, but it would just be interesting. These 2 kind of older guys. I think that could be a lot of fun. But you match maybe those 2 up. Get Uriah one top 5 win, though, because bantamweight is such a good division right now. It would be a shame if he just got to springboard on top of the guys like Piotr Jan and Aljamain Sterling to get that title shot.
I think you bring up a really good point, and on last night's episode of Between the Links, this was one of the questions. What's next for Uriah Faber? And I answered and said, Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain Sterling makes sense because if you go back not even a month ago, Aljamain Sterling said, yes, Joseph Benavidez deserves a title shot at 125 more than I deserve a title shot at 135. And when you have Henry Cejudo, who possesses both of the belts, you got to make a choice. And for Sterling to come out and say that, it's not good marketing, man. Like, you're putting yourself below him, but I get it. And it seems to be the dialogue that's going on social media between fighters and promotion alike. It seems more than likely that we will get Benavidez versus Cejudo at 125. And listen, Cejudo is all over the damn internet. Like, it's cringe, and now he's, admitting that he's cringed.
But
now
I mean, all publicity is good publicity in his case. Like, you either pay to see the guy win or to see him lose. You still pay no matter what.
Exactly.
And the only thing that worries me, though, is if Uriah Faber does fight Aljamain Sterling, that's a terrible matchup for Uriah Faber. I know we didn't give him much credit going into this fight, but Ricky Simone, neither one of us know him nearly as well as we know Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain Sterling's good at everything. And he's kind of just like Uriah Faber, but younger and better.
The thing for Ricky Simone, he was on, an uptick. He was ranked at 15th.
Definitely thought he was going to win.
And for Faber, you got to capitalize on this now. And another thing that I looked at was Google Trends and the biggest pops over the weekend. So Leslie Smith had a little bit of a pop. I looked at Jordan Young, undefeated, a great triangle armbar win, bit of a pop. Who else over the weekend had good fights? John Howard on Thursday at PFL beating, Ray Cooper III. A great win for John Howard. Barely really registered. Juliana Velasquez possibly getting a title shot. Alima Lane McFarland pretty much admitting, she deserves the next shot.
Logical.
A little bit of a pop. And then you have Jermaine Durandamy with one. Actually, Brianna Van Buren, that was why we brought her up before. She was second. Number one, and the way the Google Trends works, if you rank things against each other, it's a scale of 100. Your number 100 and your biggest pop that lasted was Uriah Faber. He got all the attention, but this is really, really big. This was bigger than UFC, Bellator, PFL, Dana White's Contender Series. This was the biggest event in fighting this week, and I know this week coming, there's still going to be a bit of a discussion. You've got Manny Pacquiao and the Thurman fight this weekend that's going to dominate the headlines. We're not going to cover it in any detail, but Uriah Faber is going to stick around in the minds of a lot of people. So for me, as a long-winded explanation, Dominic Cruz was a name that didn't even enter my mind. I think that's a Legends fight that you can sell, but it's going to be competitive as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But I wouldn't be disappointed if he ends up fighting Aljamain Sterling.
The only guy who I wouldn't want to see him fight is a guy like Piotr Jan, who no one really knows that much about him. He's kind of one of these unknown guys, but he'd probably violently finish him. You know what I mean? Give him a guy who has a name that would justify Uriah Faber fighting him. That's all.
100%. And then if we move into our main event, there's a lot of conversations that we could have. When we previewed this fight, it was pre-weigh-ins. And of course, we saw what happened at the weigh-ins. And there's two schools of thought. One school of thought, and I heard it on a very popular MMA podcast with a well-known host and his co-host. And his co-host said that...
I'm gonna say who it is.
His co-host said that Aspen Ladd, it could be a cramping issue. It's something that we shouldn't have to worry about. Weight cutting.
Very worried.
Weight cutting is something that's going to happen in fighting. It's always going to happen, and we should take this, maybe not with a grain of salt, but this is just tradition. I'm here to tell you, tradition in sports is always meant to be broken. And I'll make one really quick analogy. Baseball is boring as hell. The managers dress like the players.
Stupid.
I actually in MMA.
Could you imagine if Greg Popovich wore a San Antonio Spurs jersey?
But in MMA, the corners kind of wear a bit of a fight kit, but still, baseball. Old guys wearing baseball jerseys, and they don't play baseball, and they're not fans. In in baseball, they have bucked a trend. They juice the baseballs, and now everybody's hitting home runs. So you can change things that have been there forever. In MMA with weight cutting, listen, I know one championship does some things behind closed doors.
If you guys start with the one championship, I'll lose my mind.
We're going to talk later on in the Twitter purge about kind of a concern with one championship right now. Matt just previewed it a little bit. But as far as weight cutting is concerned, there are things that you can do to change it. We're not experts, and I know there's a lot of people out there, armchair experts, that are going to tell you this is what they should do and shouldn't do. I won't go there, but when you have a fighter that struggles that hard to step up to the scale, I think the commission should have stepped in and not allowed the fight to happen.
Yeah, I agree 100%. When you have someone, and that's the thing about Aspen Ladd too, it seems like every time that she has a fight, and she has a tremendous talent, especially women's bantamweight.
24 years old, and she was undefeated before Saturday
and
night.
her ground and pound is insanely violent, but it seems like she always has... maybe not issues to this extent, but there's always kind of an oh by the way with her every weigh-in.
And she's had a promotional push. She missed weight in the Leslie Smith fight, and Davidson Baker actually brought up a great point, and I hate to keep mentioning it. Yeah, she missed weight by 3.8 pounds in the Jessica Eye fight. And then in the Leslie Smith fight, she missed weight. Leslie Smith goes on to have another fight, and then that's it for Leslie Smith in the UFC. So kind of a domino effect there, and it was a good point that he made, so credit where credit's due. But I was really surprised that the fight happened. She went to the ceremonial weigh-ins, looked a little bit better, and of course you get quite a bit of time to rehydrate there. But Jermaine Durandamy, and not to toot our horns too much, but way bigger. Way outmatched as far as the striking.
I didn't see how this fight was competitive in the least bit, just due to the fact that Jermaine Durandamy's last opponent was Raquel Pennington, who's basically just a little bit worse than Aspen Ladd. They do all the same things pretty much. I mean, Aspen Ladd has better ground and pound, don't get me wrong, but they're both good wrestlers, they're both good strikers. They don't really have anything that really stands out until you get to, of course, the grappling of Ladd. So when you just saw how easily Durandamy dealt with Raquel Pennington, who did miss weight in that fight Pennington did, you just thought, well, why is she the underdog basically going into her second fight that's the exact same same. She's a phenomenal striker. We established that with really good takedown defense. So we just didn't really see how Aspen Ladd would get the advantage in this fight.
So it ends quick. Controversial stoppage in the fight.
It was a little early.
A lot of people thinking it was a little early. It's tough to tell if in Herb Dean's mind, and listen, it's easy to point fingers, but it's tough to tell from his perspective. A glancing blow, a blow that might not have hit on the second attempt by Jermaine Durandamy when Ladd kind of turned her back. But the problem for me was Ladd went a full 180 around. Hands down on the ground.
The difference was
she looked like she was out, but who knows what Herb Dean saw.
Exactly. And I don't think it was a terrible stoppage. I just think it was a little early. I just think that due to the fact that when Aspen Ladd got hit around, she posted on her hands. It wasn't like her hands went limp. She posted on her hands and then tried to turn. And when she was turning, the second shot didn't hit. I mean, if you go back and replay, it just kind of hits her shoulder. And maybe if that hits her, it puts her out and it's done. It just would have been nice to not have these kind of unanswered questions going into the next week.
So it leaves us two questions. So we'll go with the person that lost the fight in Aspen Ladd. 24 years old, one loss on her record. She's looked so impressive since she's joined the UFC. In her run in Invicta, she was great as well. What's next for her? Does she stick around at 135? Does she move to 145? And whether or not she moves, what's a likely next fight for her?
Well, just due to the fact that that's kind of what I was starting to say, how it seems like every weigh-in Aspen Ladd always has a bit of an issue. And you would think by this point you would know your body. Why wouldn't you try to make some dietary just changes to just see if you can get your body down to slimmer.
Don't forget this, too. When she was in Invicta, she fought at 125
Exactly.
pounds.
So you would think logically that 135 would be a big issue. And, of course, we're not weight-cutting experts by any means. But you can just tell that if you've had problems in the past, why wouldn't you try to at least change something or fix those going into the future? Now, if she does decide to stay at 135, because let's be honest, there really isn't a division at 145. I mean, she'd probably beat Megan Anderson, but that doesn't really mean anything. I would like to see her fight the winner of this weekend's fight between Irene Aldana and Raquel Pennington. Just bring her back up. I think that they're kind of in between that 8-4 range that you won't beat them to get a title shot, but if you do beat them, you can kind of stay in the elite of that division, and I just feel like that'd be a good matchup for her. And the good thing, too, is I know she got dropped, but she didn't take that much damage, so it's not like Aspen Ladd's going to be out for, 8 or 9 months going down. She could get a fight booked in, 4 or 5 months maybe, and that would be a comfortable amount of time because she definitely does need to heal after that. I mean, you don't get dropped like that and just be fine the next day. But, she should be able to come back reasonably soon and then hopefully kind of get back on track.
And for me, I think, a decent opponent in future and somebody that's competed at 135 and 145, and no, I'm not talking about Holly Holm, although that fight was booked earlier on this year, and it would make, a bit of sense if Holly Holm does decide to stick around in MMA. Of course, we know what Dana White said after the fight, but... Right. A fighter that I could see her fighting, Kat Zingano, somebody who does all the, kind of same things. They're very similar stylistically. And again, Zingano has...
But does Kat Zingano fight, or does she just talk shit about Amanda Nunez on Twitter after every Nunez fight? Because it seems like that's all she does nowadays.
She has taken a fair bit of fights. She's been active recently, which is good. And that's kind of...
Kat Zingano's last fight?
Who I'd like to see her fight next. She had a good showing before Anderson, and then she fought Anderson. So that's where we've seen her. Now, the next question is, of course, Jermaine Durandamy, your first featherweight champ in the UFC. Then she dropped down to 35, and she's looked good in those last 2 fights. And she's been relatively active as far as Jermaine Durandamy's concerned, someone who would typically take only a fight a year. Undefeated in Muay Thai and kickboxing, 9-3 now in MMA, and she beat a guy.
Kind of neat.
Realistically, for my money, she's the next likely challenger at 135.
Here's the bad thing, though. I think she is the likely next challenger. I mean, maybe Nunez moves up to fight Cyborg again. I don't really need to see that fight all that much. We saw how it went the first time. It'd be a fun fight at 135. I know they did fight before, but that was years and years ago, so you think it might be a little bit different. The only issue is Jermaine Durandamy does everything pretty much the exact same that she used to. Amanda Nunez used to be pretty wrestling and jiu-jitsu dominant, but now she's just amazing at everything. So... I don't think it's the most competitive fight, but I agree with you. It is probably the right fight to make. And that wouldn't headline a pay-per-view, I don't think. That's more of like, here's a John Jones or Max Holloway fight, and then we'll put this as the co-main event. I feel like that's where that would be slotted.
And the last time that Jermaine Durandamy headlined a pay-per-view was against Holly Holm. 200,000 buys on that one, which actually beat UFC 236 that we had recently.
Well, but that was due to the ESPN.
It also topped UFC 224, which was Nunez and Raquel Pennington. So interesting of note, and that was pre-ESPN Plus.
Yes. I think Nunez is a much bigger star now, though, than she was a year and a half ago.
It's a tough sell. We should ask Darren Rovell what he thinks about that. He's all about UFC ratings and trashing Amanda Nunez as a superstar, which we covered in great detail last week if you want to hear our praises for Amanda Nunez. So, Matt, let's just have a quick look over at Bellator, and then we'll get into some of the other segments that we're going to cover in the show.
Sounds good.
All right, Matt. So Bellator 224, we had this on Friday night. So it happened before UFC Sacramento. We had 3 post-lim fights. Yeah. And listen, once the fights are over at about 1:30 a.m. Atlantic time, I get pretty tired. But you know what? There were some decent fighters on the undercard here. You had the Canadian Gabriel Varga. Did not look good in the first round.
No, looked good in the second round, though.
Look good in the second round. He was able to get the win there. Bellator kickboxing champ. Kiefer Crosby coming over, making his American debut with Bellator. We sung his praises beforehand. Loses to Mike Jackson by disqualification. He ended up kneeing him while Jackson had 2 knees down on the canvas and his arms were up. An illegal strike there. The commission decided no dice. Leslie Smith made her Bellator debut.
She did. She's fighting for a title next.
Very important fight, and that's why we decided to talk about these prelims. A great fight against Sinead Kavanaugh.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
This was one of the most fun fights you're going to see in women's featherweight, apart from...
Leslie Smith has an exciting style.
They had 2 other women's featherweight fights on this card, which was awesome. But Leslie Smith, like you said, really exciting. Strike first, always pressuring against Kavanaugh, who fought a good fight.
She did.
An SBG type of fighter too, but for Leslie Smith, we're talking potential title shot next, so keep that in mind as we continue on. Jordan Young, undefeated, 11-0, gets the win against Joel Bauman there. It was a first round submission. Arlene Blenko continues. I mean, you look at a record of 12-7, and you might think, listen, she's not that great. She either gets knocked out,
she also fights Julia Budd every other fight,
or she knocks somebody out. And in the 2 Budd fights, it's a split decision loss, and it's a loss by majority decision. So she's super, super talented. I know she's later on in her career, but she still has ungodly power for the division. Finishing Amanda Bell, who goes to 500. You also had Will Fleury. SBG Products 6-1 gets the win by decision over Antonio Jones. He was all over Jones
just
the
had way
entire
better
fight.
for the most part.
AJ Agazarm, you know him as the BJJ specialist, the Diaz team guy, representing the 205, gets a win against a guy who was 0-1.
Yeah, that didn't mean. Yeah, that fight just.
It was a lesser win than what you're going to see Dylan Dennis get in the future. So keep that one in mind. And then Christian Edwards, Justin Vargas, you get Edwards getting the win there. Then if we move on to our main card, Ed Ruth looked great.
He did.
Ed Ruth gets the knockout win over Kiichi Kunimoto. Impressive win for him there. Good way to start off the card. So then
terrible ideas to who should fight next.
In your next fight, Juliana Velasquez taking on Christina Williams. This was a fight that had title implications at flyweight. What did you think of this fight? Because, Matt, I know you would pick Warhorse all day and all night.
I don't want to talk about it, to be honest. I really had high hopes for Christina. I thought that she'd be able to keep it on the outside, use her kicks, but that just
She kept it on the outside.
Well, she did, but how did it go for her, Craig?
She kept her back against the cage, and she's
like Tyron Woodley did.
She's a black belt in Taekwondo, and she needs to push forward, but Velasquez just continued to pepper, and push forward, able to get the win there. Velasquez looks great, undefeated.
Definitely fighting for a title next.
I think she poses the biggest test to Alima McFarlane that we've seen yet, because Valerie Letourneau, if we even look back to that, and that was a tough test, this is a Valerie Letourneau that fought the best of the best in the UFC.
Yeah,
she's past 35 in the division. So for Velasquez, I think she's at the perfect time of her career. Yes, she's only 9-0, but she's in her prime right now. It's a good fight to have.
Exactly.
In our co-main event, Matt, you and I talked about it. Really similar stylistically between Rafael Carvalho, former middleweight champ, taking on Chitty Bang Bang and Joe Kawani. And you saw Carvalho pre-fight when they showed this on DAZN. He was backstage and he was taking his coach down. And Big John said this way before the fight happened. Carvalho's going to take him down and win.
Yep.
Exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Rafael Carvalho got on top of him. Joe Kawani
He has no ground game at all.
You look at the John Salter fight, a first round win for Salter, and it wasn't even close.
No, but you think John Salter's a hell of a grappler. Maybe it'll be different against the guy who's not really known as the grappler. No. This was basically Craig probably could have taken him down and just grounded him out for 3 rounds. You know who he reminds me of? He reminds me of
a kickboxer.
It was just insane. Just work on your ground game. It's not that big of a deal. And you would think if your striking is at such a high level, maybe we don't need to work strictly on your striking. Maybe we can just take a little bit more time, work on our wrestling, or at least make it so we can get back up. Nope, didn't even happen.
Chitty Bang Bang.
Chitty Bang Bang.
Got to go back to the drawing board with
or the regional scene
with Anthony and Joe Kwani, and then in our main event, so Julia Budd's taking on the Big Bad Wolf.
Curtis Millender. That's what it reminds me.
The Big Bad Wolf.
That's my bad. I just remembered.
The Big Bad Wolf. Yeah. Olga Rubin.
It's quite the walkout.
The best walkout. And I said this in between links. Keyshawn attacked me, but Brad Pickett was getting her into the fight by doing the pre-fight.
Not only, it
wasn't abuse. I understand, but still.
Okay, what Jason Perillo does to Cyborg might be though.
That's even more. But
it hauls off.
Olga Rubin comes in undefeated. She had really good wins coming into this one.
How'd she leave this?
She really did, but it was a teep kick to the liver. And listen, I had to go out there and figure out what's the exact difference between a teep kick and just a regular front kick.
Yeah.
You got to put that knee out there first, and you lead with the knee. It's almost like pitching mechanics where your elbow has to be. So keep that in mind. Maybe go out there and watch some of those videos.
One's more like a whip, the other one's like a push.
Exactly. So Bud, knee out, push right to the liver.
And it didn't look like it hit all... Like, it definitely connected, but it was one of those things like you're like, oh, that's just a teep. And then you kind of saw the reaction afterwards.
And there was a split second where she was kind of like, yeah, I'm all right.
Yeah.
Ooh, boy.
Not a great poker face.
Bud just pushed her back, landed a barrage of knees and strikes, gets the win. So there's a few things to unpack.
Yes, let's go.
So first thing, and she has talked about fighting Cyborg, and now it's kind of out
Gabby
there.
Garcia.
She's talked about fighting her. That's what happened post-fight. So post-fight, she says, listen, these cross-promotional things are cool. My husband fought guys that were 100 pounds heavier than him, which isn't true. Lance Gibson never fought anybody. He fought Gono back in his one UFC fight.
Sure.
I'm talking about crazy dance moves, crazy intros, and Dream and Pride. That's who he fought. And Lance Gibson, look at him now. He big boy. Yeah, he is a big boy.
He probably outweighed him by 100 pounds.
Either way, so Julia Budd wants to fight Gabby Garcia. Gabby Garcia comes out today, and we're doing this on Tuesday. It's going to come out tomorrow on Wednesday. Gabby Garcia said basically, and I'm paraphrasing, watch what you wish for. Gabby Garcia, I will say, she's 6-0 with 1 no contest. Her last 3 fights, win, no contest, win. All the fighters she's fought, never had any pro MMA fights.
Bunch of grandmothers.
She fought Barbara Neppelman-Sano in her last fight, who's a great kickboxer. She's young. She's like 26 years old.
Yeah.
Got a key lock win there. You know, arm extension, the old key lock. The no contest was, I believe it was due to an eye poke. She's missed weight in one fight before, and lately she's been weighing in at between 226 and 246, somewhere around there. The perfect heavyweight weight. Julia Budd regularly weighs in at 145 pounds, and she's no joke. She takes it incredibly serious. You're not going to see her missing weight. I think Rise and Cross Promotion's great.
I don't think this ain't it, though.
If we look in the last year, so you've got Reina Kubota coming from Ryzen to Bellator and gets starched. You look at Darren Caldwell goes over to Ryzen, gets starched. Horiguchi comes over to Bellator and starches Caldwell. So Bellator has mixed results so far.
Well,
they're
the
1
difference
and 2
is
and
though
3.
Horiguchi's considered like pound for pound in the world a great fighter, and Julia Budd nor Gabby Garcia are really included into that category.
So we'll see what happens.
Gabby Garcia.
For me, Chris Cyborg has a fight against Felicia Spencer coming up later on this month.
Couldn't care less about that fight.
It's Chris Cyborg's last fight in a UFC contract. She's had issues with the promotion in the past. She's talked about wanting to go to bigger and better places. She actually said, and if you look at the article that I wrote about it, Julia Budd Cyborg, that's fight to make featherweight. Chris Cyborg said after Julia Budd got this win that Bellator has the better featherweight division, and obviously she's not wrong.
Because they have a division.
Because they have one that they actually have fights in, and it's fun to watch.
Let's be honest, though, if Nunez went over there, she
No, exactly. But do you think that a move for Cyborg is likely later on this year?
So I was thinking about this. I was thinking if Cyborg and Nunez do have a rematch, would it be any different than the first fight? I don't think it would be in the least bit. Just due to the fact that Cyborg now isn't the Cyborg of 2011 who is just running over everyone in 30 seconds. Like, she definitely has aged and her game has showed it. And I definitely think she'd be the favorite against Julia Budd. It's just go to where the division is and where it can be more active, and especially in Bellator. I mean, Cyborg is a pretty big name, and just due to the fact that she could have like the sponsors on her shorts and whatnot, she makes so much money just from that.
South Coast Mitsubishi,
exactly, the big time dollars.
Dunkin' Donuts,
but yeah, she could have exactly the Dunkin' Donuts thing. Like, she could have a lot more sponsorships and a lot more opportunities to just kind of like get her name out there.
She's already setting it up from a business standpoint. She also has, of course, previous business dealings with Scott Coker, and Strikeforce pushed her as a star. So you got to think that the star power is going to translate. It has in the UFC, but with that loss, people are going to kind of, not discredit her, but they're not going to pay attention as much as they did.
Exactly.
The lore and the aura that kind of was around Cyborg, it's kind of gone a little bit now. So maybe Julia Budd takes on Gabby Garcia, though it's unlikely, but Chris Cyborg to me makes the most sense.
Yeah, when I'm thinking of Cyborg goes to Bellator, maybe fights 2 or 3 times and then retires. I don't really think she has this long career ahead of her anymore, and I think that that'd be a great idea for her. Like we were saying, she's really set herself up business-wise for the future, and if she did have a lot more sponsorship opportunities with Bellator, that really would help her, set up deals and whatnot for after she's done fighting.
The last point I have on this before we wrap it up, Julia Budd just recently signed a 4-fight contract due to fight over 16 months, so you're going to see her in the next year and a half fight 4 times.
Nice.
You don't want to have her fighting Gabby Garcia and Ryzen and risking injury.
And then come back 4 months later
to the rest of that.
Cyborg.
You have to think about Julia Budd too. She's past 35 just like Chris Cyborg is. You want to have good fights, meaningful fights, and if she fights Cyborg and loses the title, you can still have 2 fun fights after that.
Yeah, they could have a trilogy easily and people would buy into it. Have one in Brazil, have one in Vancouver, and then have like the rubber match if it goes to that somewhere in the US.
In Thackerville, because Julia Budd's fought her last 4 fights in
Exactly, but no, you could definitely have something fun and definitely grow the whole featherweight division as a whole. And then if there are more eyes on it, hopefully they can sign more athletes to that division and really, round it out going into the future.
So, Matt, that does us for the weekend recap. Now, what could we do? We've got round number 1. We've got the Twitter purge, and we've also got a little bit of a preview. Plus, we're going to have those 2-minute breakdowns later on this week. But, Matt, you know what we're doing in this episode?
What?
We're splitting things up. So if you're paying attention on YouTube, you can just end us right here. I'd appreciate it if you didn't, but you could. But if you're following along with the full show, Matt, let's get into our favorite new segment of the show, round number 1. We've got a great question this week, so let's get into it.